Is there anything better than having a new haircut, especially when you shave your head? Anyone who's ever shaved their head will really understand this, that your hair, even if it only grows out like an inch or two, it gets so incredibly annoying. And so I finally got myself down to the salon. I had them shave my head. I feel so good. It feels so much better. And the reason I bring this up is that let's just say, there's been quite a few of you, many more than I would have actually guessed, that have been expressing concerns about my leftist haircut or my feminazi haircut. And what's been really fun and especially pleasing is those of you who have told me that it would really be my fault if my husband of 9 years cheats on me because of my haircut. I told him that last night and he kind of rolled his eyes and said, "Carlin, stop reading the comments." Which is probably good advice. But I bring this up because, it is actually kind of related to the topic I want to talk about today, which is that there is no such thing as an objective reality. Some of you may look at me and judge me immediately based on my haircut and say, oh, if you just saw me walking down the street, be like, she's a leftist or, a feminist or all this stuff, and you want to stay away from me as far as possible. That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it might be that I don't like spending a lot of time on my hair. I need something that's easy. I want something that looks cool. And this is about the easiest haircut in the world. I love it. And no, I will not be changing it anytime soon. But this is a video I promised to do last week because listen, I made my CPAC video last week, and one of the things I said, kind of just like an off-the-cuff remark, is that there is no such thing as an objective reality. And, I pay attention to the comments. I don't always respond, but I do pay attention, and y'all immediately jumped on that. And we're like, oh my God, Carlin, there is such a thing as an objective reality. All this stuff, whatever. So I know, this is my fault. I did not do a very good job explaining this, and I want to take a step back and talk about what I mean when I say there is no such thing as an objective reality. And you might agree with me at the end of the video, you might disagree with me, whatever, but at least you'll know where I'm coming from and the perspective I have. You see, in the real world, and just so you guys know, this is not going to be an overly political video. This is actually going to be mostly taken from presentations that I do about mindfulness in the workplace. For those of you who don't know, that only know my political stuff, in real life, I'm an organizational psychologist, and where I've really specialized for the last several years is in integrating organizational psychology, positive psychology, and mindfulness techniques together to help people create better work experiences. And one of the core things that I teach when I'm showing people how to do this is that you are in charge of what you experience every single day. Your boss isn't in charge, your coworkers are not in charge, that person you hate that works down the hall is not in charge. You are in charge, and you are in control of what you experience every single day. So we're going to talk about why that is. Why might there be some old dudes behind me on this screen right now? Well, I want to talk about a study that happened in 1979, actually where I live in New Hampshire. And what happened is Dr. Ellen Langer is a psychologist out of Harvard. Harvard is obviously about an hour south of where I live. She drove a bunch of old dudes up to a monastery in New Hampshire for her famous counterclockwise experiment. And so what happened is the guys were split into two groups. The first group came in and they lived at this monastery for a week, and they reminisced about what it was like to live 20 years prior. They remembered different sports icons that they saw. They talked about different news of the day, but they were living, just remembering the past, thinking of fond memories from their earlier years when they were 20 years younger. That was our first group. That's the control group. The second group came in and they did something a little bit different. See, what they had done in the monastery is they had removed all signs that would give the men that were coming in the experimental group cause to see themselves as their current age. Instead, what they had this second group do is live as though they were 20 years younger. So you see the difference there? The first group reminisced about what it was like to be 20 years younger. The second group actually lived as though they were 20 years younger. So when they were discussing news of the day, they discussed it as though it was taking place in real time. They wore clothes that was similar to what they would have worn in 1959. They actually removed all the mirrors from the monastery, and instead they replaced them with pictures of what these men looked like when they were 20 years younger. They read books from 20 years ago, they watched TV programs from 20 years ago, listened to the radio programs from 20 years ago, and they really lived as though they were their younger selves. They did this for about a week. So guess what happened at the end of the week? Now, both groups saw improvement. That happens when you take a vacation and you get out of the real world and you go away into hiding for a week. Both groups saw improvement, but the group that lived as though they were 20 years younger, they had improvements in physical strength. They had improvements in manual dexterity, gait, posture, perception, memory, cognition, taste sensitivity, hearing, vision, and the improvements that they had across these areas were statistically higher than that control group. And what this kind of reminds me of, oh, by the way, they also scored higher on intelligence tests. And they also did this thing where they had independent people judge before and after pictures of these gentlemen. And the after group, for those who lived as though they were 20 years younger, the people who were judging their photos judged that they looked 2 years younger in the after photos than the before photos. And all of this kind of reminds me of, one of the most famous episodes from The Twilight Zone. Now, I love The Twilight Zone. I hope you love The Twilight Zone too, because it's a really, really great show. And there's this famous episode called Kick the Can, where this old dude shows up at an old folks home, and the old folks are they're checked out, they're just kind of like waiting to die, there's no life in them. But this gentleman shows up and he's got life, he's got vigor, he may be older, but he's not ready to turn it in just yet. And what he does is he convinces the old folks in the old folks home to go out and play a game from their youth. They go out and they play a game of Kick the Can. Now, I don't really understand the appeal of Kick the Can, whatever, but they seem to really enjoy it. And once they got into it, once they started acting like children, acting like they did when they were younger, they became children. So, but these things, with the old men in the old folks home, this isn't the Twilight Zone, right? They acted as though they were younger for 1 week, for 7 days. They lived as though they were 20 years younger, and in the process, their body showed up as though they were 20 years younger. So this is not just a sci-fi movie or TV show. This happened in real life. And what we can see with this is the power of our mind. This is the power that our mind has to really make a tangible impact on our experience. And the thing of it is we drastically underestimate the amount of information our brain has accessible to us at any single second. We take in 11 million pieces of information into our brain every single second across our 5 senses. Just really allow yourself to think about that for a second. The scale of that is absolutely huge. Our brain is the best supercomputer that's ever been created in the world. However, if we were consciously aware of all that 11 million pieces of information, we'd probably go insane. And so the brain tries to help us out. And what it leaves us with, once it filters out all of the information that it deems unimportant or simply maybe not as relevant as other types of information, is we are left with about 40 pieces of data every single second that we are consciously aware of. All right, so think about that for a moment. 11 million pieces of information come into our brain every single second, but we are only conscious of about 40 pieces of that information. That is a huge disconnect. And that means that every single moment of every single day, there is more happening around you than you can ever be consciously aware of. And this is why we have to acknowledge that there is no such thing as an objective reality. Because objectivity in and of itself concedes that there must be no judgment that has taken place. Something just happens and it is what it is, and everyone sees the same thing. The problem is that everyone does not see the same thing, and we are almost instantly making judgments about the things that happen to us. And because of that, we are filtering objective information based on our emotional responses to that information. Okay, let me give you a workplace example because that's what I do. So think about a time at work when a leader in your company has tried to get everyone on board with a direction or strategy or initiative, but you hate that leader. You do not like this person. This is, nothing that this person says is going to be able to get you on board with this plan simply because you don't like them. If you don't like someone, it is near impossible for them to gain your buy-in without an awful lot of legwork, an awful lot of conversations, maybe some concessions along the way. If you're being honest with yourself, that is the absolute truth. It is much harder for us to get on. It could be the best strategy in the history of strategies. It could be the best plan that has ever been put together. And you are still going to find ways to poke holes in it because you don't like that person. This happens all the time. That is not an objective response. That is a subjective response. All right, so what's going on when we're filtering this information? Now, most of the time, when we're filtering information in our brain, we tend to give greater weight to the things that cause us fear. Ultimately, at the end of the day, every single person is almost always making decisions from one of two places emotionally. You're either making decisions from an emotional place of love or an emotional place of fear. And fear tends to be the thing we default to because that is part of our survival mechanism. Okay, so think about it this way. Say you go back in the day when we were hunter-gatherers out in the field, and you're out in the field gathering, and you're caveman style, you're gathering in the field, and all of a sudden about 50 yards away, there's a rustling in the bushes. There's a rustling, gets your attention. There's a rustling in the bushes. And you kind of perk up, and maybe your body tenses up a little bit. And what happens is that your body almost instinctively starts preparing itself to go into fight or flight. Because, maybe it's a rabbit over there in the bushes, something relatively harmless, or maybe it's the wind, nothing really to worry about. But it could also be a lion. And that lion could be coming to eat you. And so if your body does not prepare itself by your sympathetic nervous system lighting up like a Christmas tree, turning on all of your fight or flight responses, when your sympathetic nervous system lights up, your body is being prepared to do one of two things. You're going to get that rush of energy, that rush of adrenaline, and it's either priming you to fight whatever is in front of you, fight it aggressively, or it's priming you to turn around and run really quickly in the other direction, right? But if you don't make the assumption that what's in those bushes over there is dangerous, that's literally setting you up to die. Because if it is a lion, if it is dangerous, then you better get to hauling real quick, otherwise you might not make it out of there. Our brain specifically looks, the key decision makers in our brain specifically looks for things that are going to cause us pain, things that are going to cause us harm, things that are going to impact our ability to survive. And once that part of the brain gets involved, every other part of the brain has to send its energy to that survival mechanism, because survival is one of the things that's most important to us. So our brain is very, very good at picking out things that are going to cause us pain. It's not necessarily as good at picking out things that are going to make us happy or bring us joy in the midst of what might be a rather chaotic experience. Now let's go back to this idea of there is no such thing as an objective reality, though, because anytime we make a decision about something as being good or bad, anytime we make a judgment about something, we are inherently giving up our objectivity. That thing instantly goes from being an objective thing that's happened to being a subjective thing that has happened. And the problem is that almost every single thing that happens to us, we are instantly making a conscious judgment about. This thing is good, this thing is going to help me, or this thing is bad, this thing is going to hurt me. And we do this without thinking about it. We do it, this is like we are on autopilot doing this. But nothing, no experience, nothing is inherently good or inherently bad. They only have the meaning that we assign to them, right? And so if you inherently judge something, you're instinctively rather judge something as bad, you are going to be much more likely to have a more negative experience with that thing. Whereas if you can get yourself to a place of looking for opportunities in something, looking on the bright side, you are going to be much better able to have a positive experience with that thing. And listen, I have seen the mind play some incredible tricks. There are things that when we prime our brain, and you do this, I do this through meditation. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But our ability to really control our reality, this is not just a head game, folks. It's not. We can make things manifest in the real world based on our perspective and how we're looking at the situation. And I know some of you don't believe me. They're like, Carlin, you're sounding kind of like a woo-woo quack right now. I get it. I swear. And I am a little woo-woo. I am. I do the psychology stuff too. And, but the thing about it is, I really got into this stuff. I used to be such a mindfulness skeptic. I can't even tell you. Any one time someone brought up mindfulness, I'd be like, ugh, bunch of woo-woo hooey right there. But the thing of it is, when you really get into the psychological research, if you're intellectually honest, the further you keep going back, you are eventually going to land on mindfulness. You're eventually going to land on this idea that we have so much power to create this beautiful subjective experience for ourselves based simply on what's going on up here. Now, I want to tell you a story about one of the most pronounced experiences that I've had. And this was an experience that took place over the course of several years. So this photo right here is a photo of me running the 2015 Boston Marathon. Now, I know I don't look like much of a runner now, but I really used to run an awful lot. That's my husband with me, the guy who you all think is going to cheat on me because of my haircut. No, he ain't. I'll tell you what, because my husband is a champion. Let me tell you about the 2015 Boston Marathon. So I ran the 2014 one as well. My husband and I were actually, so the 2013, the Boston Marathon to me is like, it is a sacrosanct event. It is like a religious holiday. It is my thing. We all have our things. Some of y'all like the Super Bowl. I don't really understand football, but whatever, it's your thing. My thing is the Boston Marathon and the Tour de France to a lesser extent, but we're not going to talk about the Tour de France today. So I had been trying to get my husband to go to the Boston Marathon with me for a couple of years. We got married in 2011, but I didn't actually get him to the Boston Marathon until 2013 for lots of different reasons. And 2013 also happened to be the year of the marathon bombing. And my husband and I were about a block and half away from the second bomb when it went off. It was a terribly confusing experience. I mean, I still remember not knowing, walking through the streets of Boston, trying to figure out what to do or where to go. And everyone's screaming and everyone's running around and there's smoke everywhere and you don't know what's going on. And, people are talking about how things were bombed and you just don't know. It was a terrifying experience to be a part of, but it was also just, for me to have one of these things that was my thing. This is my thing. I have a lot of other people's things too. It's not exclusive to me, but to have that happen at your favorite, one of your favorite things in the world, it was just a heart-wrenching experience. And I had run marathons before. I had done a lot of half marathons. I'd done the Philadelphia Marathon, and I knew that I wanted to try to run the 2014 Boston Marathon. And the 2014 Boston Marathon was amazing. I ended up getting on the Dana-Farber fundraising team because I've never been a fast runner in my life. I'm persistent and I'll keep up with it, but I cannot run fast, so I was not going to be able to qualify for it. I knew that. But I did get on the Dana-Farber fundraising team, which fundraises for innovative cancer research. I raised a lot of money for cancer research to get that spot, and I was really proud to do it. What a great cause. Dana-Farber does a lot of really, really, really good things. I'm so proud to this day to have been a 2-time member of that team, and who knows, I may go back someday again. But so the 2014 marathon was awesome. The weather was perfect. Just the crowds were absolutely amazing. Like if you wanted to feel like a hero, you were in the like, oh my God, I've never experienced anything like it in my life. It was a thrill of a lifetime. So of course I decided to go back for the 2015 marathon. Now, this is where things get a little tricky for me because very early on in my training for the 2015 marathon, I started developing a lot of problems with my legs and specifically with my calves cramping up really, really tightly and painfully every time I would try to run. I'd run for, not even like a couple of minutes. My calves would cramp up and eventually they would loosen up. But we're talking like several miles into the run is when they would loosen up. And so I went to, listen, I can't tell you how many doctors I went to. I went to like every single type of doctor I could think of. I went to the best sports medicine doctor in New England. One of the top sports medicine doctors in New England for months. She couldn't help me. I saw chiropractors. Chiropractors always like feel great. It's great to have an adjustment, but they couldn't help me. I was getting weekly massages specifically focused in on my calves to try to get them to loosen up. They couldn't help me. Like no one knew why this was happening with my calves. And so I just kind of kept training as much as I could, but it was an incredibly painful thing to do. So then fast forward to the day of the marathon and I'm at the starting line and I'm like severely undertrained from all of this. And it's nothing like the 2014 marathon. Like the 2014 marathon was beautiful, perfect weather, maybe a little bit hot, but like whatever. The 2015 marathon was rainy. It was like 35 degrees out. There was a 40-mile-an-hour headwind. I was like, oh, this is going to suck. Like, not only am I undertrained, like, this is just going to be, like, a really sucky day. But you have an entry to the Boston Marathon, you put on your big girl pants, and you do it. Because every runner in the world wants to be in Boston that day. So, get to this picture. This picture, my husband is such a champion. He really is. He waited around at the Dana-Farber tent, which is between miles 16 and 17, all day waiting for me to get there. And then he joined me on the marathon course to run, to support me. Now this picture, people see it and they're like, aw, isn't that a nice picture? Well, let me tell you what's actually happening in this picture. This picture, I think, was right around Heartbreak Hill, Heartbreak Hill is not one single hill, by the way. It's 3 hills for those of you who are ever thinking about running the Boston Marathon. It's 3 hills, and it happens to take place at the point in the race where you have exhausted your stores of like carbohydrates. It's around mile 20, 21, something like that. And so this is where you start hitting the wall because your body is transitioning to burning fat instead of muscle, all this stuff. But so I'm not in a good place in this photo. Like we sucked it up, we took a good photo, whatever. But I'm whining. I'm in so much pain at this point. I'm like, Victor, I don't want to do it. Victor's dragging me up the hill, screaming at me, Carlin, you can have all the beer you want when you finish. And that was what was going on in this picture. And my husband, being the champion that he is, he ran with me until mile 25 when you kind of get into the main part in Boston where he had to exit the course because security was getting a lot higher. Not too long after he exited the course, I ran under an overpass before you go take the right onto Hereford and the left onto Boylston. And when I was under this bridge, I broke down and started sobbing because I was in so much pain. And of course, because I was under a bridge, my sobs reverberated for everyone to hear. That was a really good moment. But I finished the race. Yay. But I gotta tell you, like, it was so painful for me that I was like, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. I don't know how to fix this problem with my legs. It's not going away. I've tried everything. I don't know what to do. Fast forward about 3 years. 3 years. And this problem, and I'd every once in a while, I tried to run. I gained a lot of weight. I'm still working on losing the weight. But I had gained a lot of weight in the meantime because I wasn't running like I was before. But I had discovered meditation. And I was on this meditation retreat in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And this is with Dr. Joe Dispenza. Now, Dr. Joe, listen, he's a little bit culty. He is, I'm not going to lie. I don't think he necessarily means to be, but I think a lot of the people who go to his retreats end up being a little bit culty. But he's written wonderful books. He's written The Placebo Effect, I think is his first book. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, which is a really interesting book. He's written a whole bunch of them. But his work is all around using meditation to heal physical things that are going on in your body. And he does other stuff too, but that was really, I went to this week-long retreat in Santa Fe, New Mexico. This was the meditation group I was with. The retreat was actually like 800, 900 people, something like that. So there were a lot more people there, but this was the team that I had been put on, the silver team. And so we just basically did different meditation exercises all week. Now, about partway, I want to say like halfway through the week, we're in this meditation exercise and my legs start shaking. Now, when you're in meditation, you don't worry about physical things that are happening in your body. You just kind of like notice them and then you let it go. That's part of the purpose. You're not supposed to worry about it. But my legs started shaking and they started shaking like really, really badly. This has never happened to me before in meditation. And so I just kind of like noticed it. I acknowledged it and I moved on from it. Afterwards, I got up and I was like, my legs feel good. Like, what happened? What happened with my legs? And I just had this little inkling in the back of my head. I was like, you've had a healing here. Your legs have gone through something that are going to help you. And I kind of picked up my stuff and I ran right over to the hotel gym and jumped on the treadmill, started running. Lo and behold, I was not experiencing half the pain that I had felt for years. Remember, this is several years after the marathon, and this injury had not gone away. It was still there. I still couldn't run, and I jumped on the treadmill after this happened to me, and I'm not going to say it was completely gone, but it was like 75% gone. And I broke down and cried because I knew that I had been looking for all of these doctors, all of these practical, objective doctors that use science and medicine to heal this injury. And the thing that it maybe had ultimately led to it healing was all up here. That's not objective. That's subjective. That's my experience. That's something that I was able to pull from within myself. Now, you might look at me and say, Carlin, you're insane. Meditation obviously didn't heal your legs. I disagree. And if something is real to me, then that's my objective experience. That's my objective experience, is that meditation healed this injury. And it's been, a couple years since I was on this retreat. It didn't get up to 100% until about 6 months ago. I just kept doing the meditations. I kept seeing myself as a person who could run without pain. And you have to do the work when you're doing this stuff. You have to do the work. You have to be consistent about it. You have to convince your brain that you are a person who can run without pain. And now 2 years later, I'm at a place where it doesn't bother me at all anymore. It really doesn't. It's like every once in a while I get a little smidge of something when I'm like on the treadmill at Orange Theory, and I just say to myself, Carlin, you are a person who can do this. You are a person that runs without pain, and it goes away. And I can't tell you, this is what really drives home for me, that our experience, it's up here. It's up here. I want to tell you another story about this retreat, though, because I was not the only one who had physical healing at this retreat. I was also with another couple that the man, he healed a shoulder injury he had for years. All of a sudden, he could raise his arm again. He hadn't been able to do that for years. But the biggest thing I saw was when, so one of the things we did was walking meditations. And so in walking meditations, the whole goal is that you are supposed to walk as the person you want to be, not as the person you are now. You are supposed to walk as the person that you want to be. And I remember going outside at 6 a.m. It was so cold to do this walking meditation. And I had in my mind what I was going to do when I was marching out there and all this stuff. But on my way out to walk on this path, I passed this older gentleman, and I had seen him all week at this retreat. He was in a wheelchair all week. He was not walking. But in this walking meditation, he's out there and he has 2 canes. And he has a person following behind him in the, like, holding the wheelchair just in case he needs to sit down. But he's up, he's out of his wheelchair, he's got his 2 canes. He's slowly making his way, just putting one cane in front of the other, just slowly making his way. I passed him at the beginning. I just kind of saw him. I was like, okay, cool. He's doing his thing. He's up out of his chair. That's awesome. I passed him at the end. And this was maybe, it was like 30, 45 minutes later. But I passed him again at the end. Guess what? He's got 1 cane in each hand, but he's not using them anymore. He's marching. Again, I had not seen this guy walk all week. He was marching. He was going slow. He was going at his own pace. But he was walking on his own. If you were to look at him and say, you came here in a wheelchair, you can't walk, that is an objective medical thing. Well, try telling him that when he's walking. When he's walking. And the reason I talk about the physical experience of this and the power of our mind to do this is because it flies in the face of what so many people might consider objective reality. Objectively, I should not be able to heal my calves through my mind. Objectively, that guy shouldn't be able to walk when I hadn't seen him walk all week for, a 45-minute walking meditation. That should not have been possible objectively. But it was possible because he believed it was. And it was possible for me because I believed it was, because I placed that subjective judgment on it. So when we're talking about this idea of there being no objective reality, when we're talking about this idea, the biggest question that I always have for people who say, Carlin, obviously there's an objective reality. Well, the biggest question I have is, who gets to choose it? Who is in charge of deciding what the objective reality is? Is it you, or is it me, or is it that other guy? Is it the president? A lot of people wouldn't like that right now. Who gets to decide what objective reality is, and on what basis do they get to decide what objective reality is? Because I know an awful lot of people who would look at me and say, Carlin, objectively, you can't heal yourself just by thinking happy thoughts, and that's not my reality. Things are true to people who believe them. I absolutely believe that I healed myself through meditation. I absolutely know multiple people who believe that they have healed themselves through meditation, through doing other things that are not scientific or approved of in the medical world. So who gets to tell them that their reality, that their experience is not objective? The very minute that we start to pass judgments on things, and that, again, remember, that happens almost instantly unless we are making a conscious attempt to turn things around. But most of our judgments are passed instantly and they are passed subconsciously. The minute that we pass judgment is the minute that we are witnessing a subjective reality. And I can give you example after example after example of how you, as a human being, might see something differently than your neighbor, than your best friend, than your coworker, than me. Who gets to decide what the objective reality is? My answer is that there's no one that gets to decide what objective reality is. There's no one. And because there's no one who gets to decide what objective reality is, that means that reality inherently cannot be objective. Because we can look at literally exactly the same thing and get 2 different responses. So, what I always tell people is, listen, if you want to have a better experience, embrace this idea that there is no objective reality, because that fundamentally puts you in charge. That puts you in a much greater position of empowerment if you say there is no such thing. And that's when you can make the choice to start seeing all of the opportunities around you. Opportunities that some people would say, objectively, that's crazy. Objectively, you can never do it. BS. Don't listen to any single one of those people. And when you do that, that's when you become uneffable, because that puts you in charge of your experience. The minute that you embrace this idea that there's an objective reality that someone gets to sit on high and judge, is the very minute that you put someone else in charge of what you experience in this world. You can do that if you like. It's a choice. I think it's a bad one though, and I think it sets you up to have all sorts of other people's nonsense be put on you and become a part of your experience in a way that is not going to serve you. All right, listen, so if you enjoyed this video, I wrote a whole book about this stuff. It's called Zen Your Work. Now, this is specifically about different mindfulness techniques, just like, that we've talked about here, that you can apply to your work experience to make it a better one. Because frankly, work is my first love. Politics is probably my second love, but work is my first love. Helping people to have better work experiences is one of my absolute favorite things to do. If you appreciate this video, please consider picking up a copy of my book. It's available on Amazon. You can get it in paperback or as a digital version or even as an audio download. Or it's available lots of other places as well. But Amazon, let's be honest, is usually the easiest. So check it out if you like this video. And I think I might be starting a book club soon. I used to have a Zen Your Work book club, and I kind of let it go away just because I was taking a little break. I had other stuff to do. But I might be reviving it. Who knows? So you can get ahead of the game by picking up your copy of the book and keep an eye on this channel or on my website, zenworkplace.com, for more information about the book club, hopefully coming soon.